Hello, welcome to this intro to Chatgpt for therapists. I'm Lori Husband, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm so excited to share with you how I've been using Chatgpt in my practice. It's started to make my life so much easier, and it's quickly become my new favorite coworker. So I can't wait to share with you all that I've learned. So go ahead and grab a cup of coffee and let's dig in. You are likely watching this presentation because, like me, you've been following the news and you've heard a lot about AI and ChatGPT. And if you're like me, you've probably got many questions like, what exactly is AI? What is ChatGPT? And most importantly, how is this going to impact my work as a therapist? So first off, AI is a very deep topic, and don't worry, we are not going to get into the super technical details today. But I do want to say that it is here to stay and it's already everywhere. And I believe we need to get on board if we want to continue to grow as therapists, because it will be impacting us. And I'd like to start by suggesting that we think of AI as augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. So it's something that will add to, improve, and augment the work we already do every day. So it is not going to, take away or replace your clinical skills or your thinking and judgment, but it can make your life easier, and it could help you be more creative and efficient as a therapist. So you might be wondering, what does it take to get started with a tool like ChatGPT? And it's surprisingly simple. So it's pretty easy to get logged in, and I will show you how to sign up in the homepage if you stay till the end. And if you fit into any of these categories, if you're interested, curious, skeptical, then you kind of have a head start in learning this. And then I'll walk you through some ways that you could start putting it into practice in this talk. About me, I am a psychologist, I own a private practice, and I've taken a few courses on prompt engineering. What happened is ChatGPT was released about a year ago, and I became fascinated and kind of hooked on learning more, especially when I saw how sophisticated it was at conversation. So after taking a few courses and digging deeper into ChatGPT, I figured out some ways that it could help me in my practice. Things like admin tasks or even marketing or creating content. And I'm ultimately thinking now that it's really going to help us as therapists, and I want to share this. Here is what we'll be covering in this talk. We will discuss a little bit about what AI and ChatGPT are, and then I'll show you how I'm using it in my practice, and I'll give you some rich clinical examples and tools that you could take and use right away. Then we will briefly touch on some ethical issues that therapists need to be aware of when using ChatGPT. Because this course is for therapists, we won't get super technical, and we will not be discussing prompt engineering in depth. So if you already have an advanced knowledge of a tool like ChatGPT, this might be too broad for you, and you might be bored. So let's talk about AI, and let's define it first. AI technically stands for artificial intelligence, and it's a term that we hear often, but what does it really mean? I think the best way to understand ChatGPT is it's like a virtual assistant that never sleeps, a brilliant virtual assistant. And it is basically a computer program that's designed to mimic human intelligence, in some cases, human conversation. Now, AI technology has been with us for some time, even though we're just hearing a lot about it now. Think Alexa, Siri, Google Maps, Netflix suggestions. It's already been around, that kind of predictive, automated technology. It's just we've had some new advances in kinds of AI that have led to some big changes, and let's talk more about that. Okay, so here's the most technical part of the presentation, so hang in there with me. So AI is like a generalist robot or technology that can learn and do a variety of tasks. But generative AI is one of the things that's just come out into the mainstream. And generative AI is a technology that can come up with new and original content, much like a writer or an artist. And conversational or chat-based AI refers to artificial intelligence that's designed to simulate a conversation with a human. It uses technology called natural language processing to understand, process, and respond to human speech. It does it in a way that is extremely intuitive and natural. Now, this is the part that got me really excited as a therapist, because this idea of a sophisticated conversational AI tool could be really helpful. We engage in conversation every day. We're kind of a specialist in conversation, and so I think that's part of why I find it fascinating. And I think because we are therapists, we're really in a unique spot. We're poised to understand and use this tool very well. So let's demystify what the GPT part means. So if you're like me, you're like, what does that mean anyway? It stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, and that sounds complex because it is. But it's essentially a type of intelligent system that's been taught by reading a vast library of information. So basically like a scholar who has studied so many books that it can now generate its own essays and engage in complex discussions. So Chatgpt is a version of this, and it specializes in these textual conversations. It allows us a way to communicate as if we have this well-informed conversational partner, like a colleague. So I'd like you to imagine what you would do or say when you reach out to a colleague for consultation or clinical guidance. So usually, for me, it is something like the word consult. I need to consult with you about a case or have an ethical question. In this language, it's sort of a verbal signal. So it tells your colleague, what hat they need to put on and what information is going to be coming at them, so that you can have a rich exchange of ideas. So while in the world of therapy, we use, say, consultation as a cue, in Chatgpt, that cue is called a prompt. So prompt is a nudge to the computer of like, hey, I want to talk about this. So just as in consultation with a colleague, there are different kinds of consult questions. So we could have an ethical question, or we could have a case conceptualization question. And the more precise we are in asking for what we need, the better the output or outcome. And so when we engage with Chatgpt, we want to be as specific as we can in our prompts. The more precise, the better the outcome. And I like to think of it as a two-way conversation. So just as if you were discussing something with a colleague or doing an intake with a client, you would ask follow-up questions. It would be iterative in the same way with using this tool. And then another note is that part of the programming culture of Chatgpt was that it was trained to be polite. And you'll notice if you tell it did something wrong, it will apologize and it will say thank you. And so I like to continue in that culture when using Chatgpt. There are several key ingredients of a well-constructed prompt, and that includes your identity, your target audience, your style, like your writing style, and then the way you want the output. So let me give you an example. So if I went to Chatgpt and said, I'm a therapist and I need some help writing my Psychology Today profile or directory profile, and I'd like you to help me with the copy, and I might say my ideal clients are millennial women who are dating. my tone is relatable, warm, authentic, and I need this in 2 or 3 paragraphs. So this would incorporate all those elements, and it's giving it quite a bit of constraint. And by doing that, we have a better chance of getting what we need, the output we need on the first or second or third pass. So a good prompt is the key to getting a useful response. And a bad prompt would be a question that is just quite vague, like, give me some anxiety coping skills. So really a better prompt would include a lot of detail about what you're looking for, like the client's age, what kind of therapist you are, what kind of guidance you're looking for. So you can see in that last example, we have a really specific, precise prompt. I'm going to give you 4 rich clinical examples that you could begin using. And the first example is using Chatgpt to generate ideas for a session intervention. Now, before we go into this, I want to pause and just say that because the work that we do is confidential, we don't ever want to enter any client information into Chatgpt. It is not HIPAA compliant, and we should not be entering any PHI in there. So if you are wanting to do kind of clinical brainstorming, then I would enter a composite or an archetype. I would make up a scenario to get some information. I would never share information about a particular client. So sort of this idea of creating an archetype. Now this here is a prompt template, and that is what you might see in a prompt catalog. So this is kind of plug and play. You could put in your clinical orientation, the issue you're wanting to work on, and then let me show you an example. So here's an example where we tell Chatgpt we're a CBT-oriented therapist, and we have an emerging adult female client struggling with anxiety. And then we might ask for help in creating an intervention around challenging negative beliefs. This slide shows another example of how a therapist could use this kind of prompt, say as a couples therapist, or for an in-session intervention. Let me give an anecdote of how I might use this, say in a couples session. I might, if I'm teaching the speaker-listener technique, to clients, I might ask for its help in giving me some instructions that I could share as a therapist, or a handout to give to a client. You might even ask it to generate some ideas for topics for discussion for a couple. Let's say it's around finances. And I've used that where I gave it some ideas of things I was thinking, but I wanted some more ideas. And I got out, about 10 new things that I could bring it into session for discussion. And that would typically require a lot. It would require meeting with a therapist in real life, and you have to coordinate your time and then have a brainstorming. And this was just so immediate that it's amazing. Here's another example. So you could ask Chatgpt to act like therapist trained in acceptance and commitment therapy, and give you some diffusion exercises to use. So I did this just to try it, and it gave me about 10 different diffusion exercises. So I didn't have to pull out my book. I already kind of know what they are. But for example, it gave me, labeling thoughts, or using a silly voice, or passengers on the bus. So then you could take that a step further and say, give me the instructions for this, or help me think of a metaphor which would apply to my client. So let's say if we're doing the tug-of-war metaphor, we might say, my client is really into sports. Can you help me think of a metaphor that would fit this? And again, that's kind of that brainstorming that would take a lot of time and thinking. That it's like a partner to help you do that. So here's our second example, which is creating a client treatment plan. Here is the template at the top that you could, copy and paste, and then an example below, you could include anything you needed in that plan. So if you need short-term, long-term goals, you need measurable outcomes, if you need to use an anxiety scale, anything you need, you could put that in there. This is a big time saver, especially if this is something you're required to do and often the same presenting problem. Our third practice example is we can ask Chatgpt to help us in brainstorming important cultural and identity considerations. So this might include racial, cultural, gender, sexual identity considerations. And I'll include an example here. This is the template, and of course we have to remember that we are the experts on this, that any output we receive we need to review with our knowledge in mind and our knowledge of the client and important cultural considerations. And now we have our fourth clinical example, which is to create a homework or a handout for a client based on our session intervention. So this one was an idea I had after explaining the dive reflex to a client. I thought, I need a handout to give for further reading, and you could go to Google, or you could just ask Chatgpt, and I did. I said, give me some psychoeducation on the dive reflex, how it could be used for emotion dysregulation, and tell me some ways that I could practice it with an ice cube. And it did. It gave me different ways you could use it. Of course, you've got to use your clinical knowledge to make sure that it's consistent with what you know about that. But it was something that it was accurate, and I could give to the client in an email or in a Word document. Let's briefly talk about ethical considerations for therapists in using AI and Chatgpt. So Chatgpt is not HIPAA compliant and confidential, so we never want to share any PHI or any details about a specific client. You could go into Chatgpt and read about the privacy if you want to know more. Some other things that we need to know is that Chatgpt was trained on the internet, and as we know, the internet is not always a culturally sensitive place. There's a lot of bad things on the internet, a lot of racism, and Chatgpt is, supposed to be trained not to have that information, but it's possible that you could get output that doesn't match something that is culturally sensitive. So you, as the therapist, always need to be discerning whether this is appropriate for your client and what you know. And another caveat is that Chatgpt does not have the ability to make clinical decisions, so it is our job as therapists to use our own judgment for diagnosis and treatment planning. It is simply a support tool and is not a substitute for professional training. So anything we give to Chatgpt, any questions that we have, is ultimately shaping it. So it's still learning and still being trained on all those things. And so that is a positive spin on it, that we could be impacting or informing it for good. And then lastly, I think we want to know our clients will be using Chatgpt, if not now, in the future, in the same way that clients Google their symptoms or what to do, the panic attack. They will be eventually doing that with Chatgpt. And then there are larger societal concerns. So with any technology advancement, there's both a positive and a negative side or shadow side. We can think about the Industrial Revolution or the invention of the internet, and we couldn't really predict all the negative, dark sides of that. And so right now, I think our society is still grappling with what that means for generative AI. And, I think a concern is related to the arts and original thought and works. Also in the realm of teaching and supervision, as well as plagiarism. So this is something teachers and professors are already grappling with. So we're wrapping up this portion. If you want to hang on, I'm going to show you how to log into Chatgpt, how to enter one of these prompts. And if you want to learn more, I will be having an advanced class, and I'll send you a link to the wait list. And I also have developed a catalog with a lot of these curated prompts. So if you like those prompts and thought those were helpful, this is more in depth, and I'll include the link for that as well. But thank you so much for listening. I hope you're as excited about this as I am. And if you do want to connect, let me share my information. So here's how you can find me, and I would love to connect. Thank you. Okay, I want to show you how to get logged in to Chatgpt and sign up. So you'll go here to this chat.openai.com and click on that blue sign up button, enter your account information, and get logged in. And then let me show you what the home page looks like. So you'll see here on the left, you have your menu bar and your chat history. At the bottom, the message bar where you'll type in your prompts here, and you can upload a document. Then at the top, which version of Chatgpt you have. So you can start with 3.5 if you just want to play around with it and you're not sure how much you use it. I would start there. And if you plan to use it a lot, I would go with Chatgpt 4. It's much faster, it's more creative, and it does have things like you can upload a document and create graphics, and it's really fun. So let's see if we can try one of our examples here and see if it'll let me paste it in. So I'm going to try to paste, yes, this DBT question. So this is one of our prompts. I'm going to put it in here, act as a DBT therapist and create an explanation of the dive reflex for an adolescent, and let's see what it says. So, it's creating a age-appropriate handouts. It's in real time, kind of creating this psycho ed. So you might have heard about the dive reflex, this cool thing your body does, like a superpower. And imagine you're a dolphin diving deep into the ocean. So that's pretty cool. And then they talk about, some ways that you could use it, which is exactly what I asked for. So you could find a bowl and submerge your face. You could use ice cubes. And tells you how long. And then it gives you a guide to keeping a log. So this is exactly what we asked for. And you could literally take this, edit it, and change it in any way that you want. If you wanted to add just, holding an ice cube in your hand. And you could copy and paste this into an email or secure message or a Word document and give it to your client. So it's pretty cool. Well, thank you again for tuning in, and I hope you've enjoyed this and have fun.